Corey, so on the Windlass question, any tips on actually making them reliable? I feel like not only mine, but every boat I get on, they have issues getting caught up or jammed. Windlasses suck. They're great, but they suck at the same time. So the problem a lot of times is that the rope and the chain have to be the right match for it. So like each windlass has a certain amount of like the size chain and the size rope that you can put on it, and as the rope gets worn out, then it'll just slip and they suck, and then you got to buy a whole new rope and chain, which is like stupid expensive, like a few $100s. And so it's definitely a problem. They're great when they work, but they don't always work. Now the only thing you can really do, there's not really an adjustment to them. I mean, like a lot of times they just jam up. It's just the rope and the chain, and just that's you can keep them lubed up, like putting oil in there and getting them lubed up like that. But other than that, you're pretty much kind of stuck at making sure that rope is the right size and that the chain is the right size, and also that the line isn't all worn out. But other than that, there's not much else you can do with a windlass. It's just kind of what it is. Now, as far as your other question, the bigger problem now. I was doing about 30 to 35 miles per hour, and all of a sudden I lost all speed, but was high RPM. I ended up dropping the boat into neutral, and whenever I put it into drive or reverse, it wouldn't move. I ended up getting towed back in. I thought maybe it's a spun hub, so I borrowed a friend's prop, and it still doesn't work. With the motor off and in neutral position, it spins freely. In both drive and reverse, it locks as it should. There seems to be some slight play. I had my friend look at the cable when I put the motor in drive and reverse. The cable seems to be moving. I'm under the assumption something is wrong in the lower unit. With all that being said, what are my first steps? What should I look for? I'm going to remove the lower unit when I get a chance, but not sure where to start. So I sent this video here because this goes over exactly how I do that. And then, as well as some of the insides of it and how the shifting works on the inside of the lower unit. So this should be pretty helpful as far as like how to diagnose it and how I start doing that. But just to kind of go through it, I know you have an F250. It's a Yamaha. I can't remember the year. I want to say it's like an early 2000s, but potentially lower unit. I wouldn't get wild on what it is just yet until you figure out exactly what it is. So the spun hub, I would have been thinking that first as well, but if you change the props, it's not the spun hub. And then with the control box, what I would do is just like you had your friend look at it, I would take that cable off of there, grab the shifter with it running, and then I would move it back and forth. So, just with the engine running, take the cable off, or you can take it off before you run the engine, and then grab it with some pliers and try and shift it manually, that mechanism in the back. If nothing happens there, then the control cable all the way to the remote control box, none of that is your problem. Something is going on between the shift and down below. Now, when you drop the lower unit, you're also going to want to look at that shift shaft. So you're going to want to move that thing back and make sure that shaft is spinning, because the mechanism from the shift shaft on the bottom of the drive shaft housing that the lower unit goes into, like it's a little shaft and it goes up in it, that shaft going up to the top has like a ball bearing on there and a mechanism that attaches that mechanism to turn when you shift back and forth with your throttle cable or your shift cable. So that mechanism could have failed at some point. There is a spring with a grease fitting and a ball that is there with the detent on that mechanism, and that could have locked up, that could have broke, something there could be messed up, and so you might be shifting the cable and the mechanism moves, but that's not transferring down to the lower unit. Even though you did say that when you do it, it does lock the prop. So that is kind of concerning as well, because, I would also just drain the gear lube. I don't know when the last time you did the lower unit was, like the gear lube and all that, but I would drain that gear lube, and if that gear lube comes out gray with a bunch of metal, then that's going to tell you a lot about everything right there without having to take it apart or any of that other stuff. So if you haven't changed gear lube in a long time, or say 50, 60 hours, whatever, then I would start with that. Just you don't even have to take the lower unit off. You can start with that. You can drain that thing, and if it comes out gray and milky and burnt and messed up with metal, you got to take the lower unit off, and then that's a whole nother discussion there. But that process is kind of how I would go about that whole system with the lower unit. And yeah, that's what I got on that one.